Hi, Alice.
Good morning, Lara John.
How are you doing?
Truly excited to be here, and especially in this hall.
We're in the National Library of Armenia, so it's only poignant and symbolic that we have you as our guest on Mindful Leaders Inherit Legacies here in this beautiful hall. You're right. I'm so excited that you're here. I have so much respect and love for you. Your successes and your achievements are just insatiable. You're an educational leader. You are a teacher, you're a consultant. Your achievements, and all that you've done up until today, I can't even imagine somebody having the same type of resume or profile as you have.
Thank you.
I'm only going to mention a few things because the list is extensive and very rich. So you have held multiple leadership positions in different school districts in California, community colleges, state university systems. You have been member and chair of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing for the state of California during the leadership of different governors. Currently, you're not stopping. Your energy keeps going and moving forward, thankfully, because you are member of the LA County Commission for Women, the Foundation Board for California State University. You sit on different boards such as Teach for Armenia, UWC Dilijan School, Armenian Educational Foundation, International Women's Association, and the list goes on. It is impeccable. But there's something I want to also highlight here is that thanks to all of your community services, the volunteer work that you've done over the years, you have received numerous medals and awards. One that I have to point out is the prestigious Ellis Island Medal of Honor. So it is a privilege for me to have you sit with you and talk to you today, because you are an example of a woman who has a very clear sense of self. You are an example of a person, a human being that is courageous, perseverant, and knows what she wants. And that's very important, Alice, because we still have an issue today where numerous women, they're still experiencing a lack of self-worth and a lack of self-value, primarily because of the systems put in place in society today that hinder or restrict their true authentic selves. So my first question to you, finally I get to the question, is that how would you guide women, to help them transcend their fears and illusions, to help them break free from society's expectations, and to help them rediscover the sense of self that they are meant to discover?
I think today is different than when I first decided to be myself and to do what is right by not only me, but my community and my family. I had great role models, so I would say that each woman today, whether in Armenia or in the diaspora, has a role. We need to consider ourselves as a role model, whether within our own families for our children or for the outside observer. What I see in Armenia is a whole new awakening as it relates to women and their role. I've had the privilege of sitting in on nearly 600 interviews of young men and women, though I would say the percentages are leaning higher towards women, who are looking to improve themselves through education. And I would say that every one of them had a vision and a goal. So my advice would be definitely create a vision, create a goal, know where you want to be. And don't set it low. We talk to young ladies who say, I want to work in a bank. And we'd say, really? How about being the bank manager? How about being Minister of Finance in Armenia? And I think that's what we're asking for, is start to see yourself at the top. And once you do, you work harder to reach that goal, and anything in between you reach. That's wonderful.
You mentioned about your role models. I want to point out, before we get into your family history, that your mother, your grandmothers have been important role models, as well as your father. Tell me, for those women who do not have those kinds of role models, would they still be able to achieve and transcend those issues and challenges?
Yes. I think you also have an access to a world of role models. By sheer internet existence, you provide the opportunity for people to meet up and talk. One of the things that I also have the privilege to do is to be a guest lecturer for Madeline Minassian's classes at AUA. And what I see is for those who don't have role models, whether it's yourself, whether it's Madeline, whether it's others, you provide that opportunity. But I continually offer to say, if you need a mentor, do not worry how many thousands of miles in an ocean divides us. Because I think what young people today have is the opportunity to reach out and touch someone in seconds. And there are women. One of the things that Armenian International Women's Association does is look to provide mentors. There are people willing across the globe to be a mentor. It's, are you willing to reach out and ask for that? And I think what you will find is that they will not only be a mentor for your personal and social growth, but they'll be a mentor for your career growth. And that's why I always advise is find someone at the top of your career rank and ask them.
Reach out to them.
Can I shadow you? Can I talk to you? Can you help me understand our career path?
Yeah, excellent. You know, I remember in one of our conversations, one of the really wonderfully inspirational conversations we've had in the past, you mentioned something that really touched my heart. And that's where you said, I know and I believe that I've been put on this earth for a particular purpose. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but it was very nice and very touching. Do you feel that you have met all of your, you've been aligning yourself with that purpose and that you've achieved all that you wanted to achieve? And my other question, follow-up question is, how does one identify what their purpose is in this life?
Well, let me begin that my interviews with you for the first time brought up memories and feelings that I had hidden so deeply. And I found myself crying. I pride myself in the strength of woman that doesn't cry. And there I was crying because you had brought up memories I had buried deep. And since then, I seem to have cheerfulness right at the tip of my eyes. But I will say this to you. A woman never meets their goal. If I had met my goal, I think I would be a few feet underground right now.
Oh.
So what I look for is that every day I live, hopefully each day I contribute something. Today we started talking about what are some contributions that are needed here in Armenia. And I think I've somewhat shifted my vision. My vision was helping all children globally, specifically educationally disadvantaged children in California, minority backgrounds, where their poverty status identifies their level of success. So I have given over 50 years to the causes of equity, access, and justice for all children. And then moved to women's issues because I could see that even in other cultures besides our own, the men, the boys were getting support, but the girls, they were left on their own. So I moved into women's causes. And now it seems like my life is dedicated to every cause possible in Armenia, specifically after the war, the soldiers, their families. It's so much so that though God did not provide me a girl, I have two wonderful boys, that my boys have picked up the cause and they are deeply involved. So have I met my raison d'etre? I would say, when it comes to children and grandchildren, I think I have, because they're engaged in doing the right thing for people. Do I think there's more to do? Oh God.
Absolutely.
There is so much more to do. And you know, people say, what will happen if you're not here doing it? I don't believe in that. I believe someone else just steps up and takes your place. My mother used to say, we're at the edge of the cliff. When one generation goes over the cliff, the next generation steps up. And that's what I believe. I believe that there's a generation right here in Armenia that can do amazing things. And you are one of those, as are the people in your circle, and you will take over.
We were talking about the conversations we had in the past, and one of them was based on the research that I was conducting on collective traumas. We went into your family history, and I will summarize a few points that I'm inviting you to complete if I've missed anything, because I think it's an important story. Your father, Hagop Shirvanyan, has a very traumatic past, obviously. His father, Vagarshak Shirvanyan, is from Van, was from Van, right? He was part of the heroes of Van. So he was a fedai, a freedom fighter. And he devoted his life to trying to save Van, and later also in fighting in Sardarabad. So he's had a very important part of your father's, he's been an important part of your father and your family's life. The reason why I say this is because a lot of the trauma that we experience is usually kept silent. You found out very later in life that your grandfather, Vagarshag, after he settled in Iran, would wake up in the middle of the night, yelling and screaming from the nightmares of remembering the bloodshed that he witnessed in Van, in Sardarabad. So it's hard to hear this, obviously, and it's hard to retell the story. And the name Shirvanyan has become an important part of your legacy, because Virgin, your father's mother, your grandmother, also told you, when you get married, don't take your husband's last name. Keep your maiden name, because there's a legacy to that last name. Looking back on your father's side of the story, before we get to Mina's story, thinking about this and hearing what I'm telling you, what do you feel, remembering what your father somewhat told you, the fact that you were not aware of the genocide until later in your life, maybe in your early teens? What is that? How do you feel when you think about these narratives?
When you talk about it, I feel this is what my grandparents must have done. I want to suppress it. I don't want to think about it, because you choke up and you can't be productive. You allow the questions that are still in your head and your heart. And what I've seen, it actually takes me towards hate, which is a feeling I fight against in youth. You've got to learn to love and be positive. But when our story is retold, I find that I don't want to do it again. I want to suppress it. And that's the feeling I have is, Lara John, please don't take me back there. And I now understand why my grandmothers would not talk about it. Yeah. And I felt cheated. I felt that there are stories that I still don't know. My grandmother gave me a gift, her first anniversary.
Your grandmother from your mother's side or your father's side?
Father's side. It's a gift of a carved purse, and it was carved in Van. And she said to me, you will continue the cause. I have other grandchildren, but every time you look at this, I want you to know the legacy's been handed to you. And I felt like, don't do that to me.
Right.
Don't put any more burden or responsibility. But she did. She must have known something when she did it. And so I want to do the good and try to fight the hate that exists. And I feel that we went through a war because there's so much hatred. And I see my own community in California and the United States perpetrating that dislike and the meanness and making the statements that bother me internally, because all my life, as I've been a student of justice and equity, it's hate that is the exact opposite. So don't tell me you believe in a just cause and hate your brother or sister or make unkind statements towards someone who is just thinking differently than you, has different beliefs. If your eventual cause is the same, love thy brother, as the Bible has said. And so for me, it has been the whole thought that my grandfather went through this hell because he dwelt in that period. Not that he could get out. Not that I see this as a way that our soldiers today are living, can get out that easily. But I think if we don't, hate will destroy us internally and externally. It's something that causes so much pain, not to only ourselves, but to others. So I believe I have not met my goals, as your question was, but I believe that by preaching the importance of understanding, I might be able to be a role model for others and for the whole cause of know your life and know your history. That's something, if there's one thing I regret my whole life,
Is not knowing your history?
is not having studied my family's history. I have a friend, Dr. Muradian, who only in her late life decided to become fully Armenian and know the history. And she wrote a book because her mother said, I will not die till you tell my story. And I wish my parents had done the same, or I had thought, I won't let you die until you fully tell me the story, and not just moments of it because something came up and you wanted to share something.
Right. I want to briefly also, because you talked about your role models, I mentioned that your mother and your grandmother also from your mother's side are actually important, have been important role models for you. And so Mina, your mother, her mother was a physician at a time when women were not physicians. From Chavakh, Tcholakian. So Vaskanush was her name, if I remember correctly.
What a memory you have! Oh my God, you did hundreds of interviews.
Yeah, no, the Vaskanush was for me it was a very interesting story because she excelled in an area where, like I said, women were not well known to be physicians. And the other part of your family from your mother's side is your grandfather Hampartsun, who was a professor from Shushi in Artsakh. And the trauma with him is that he was, during the Bolshevik Revolution, was taken, imprisoned, kept there for a very long time by the KGB. And during that time, he catches pneumonia, and because of that, he passes away. So your mother loses her father at a young age, as well as her two brothers. And with her mother, Vaskanush, they moved to Iran. The reason why I'm telling this story, which you're more than welcome to continue, is that I think it's important to see that it's not just genocide that causes us to have certain traumas or, pain that is attributed to trauma. There's a lot of different layers of traumas that are compounded, and and that's the problem, is that if we do not speak about it, sometimes what happens that during that repression, a lot of that is actually expressed in a different way, and that's, like you said, the hatred and the anger that is coming out because it's been suppressed for so long. So I firmly believe that it's important that we have that kind of historical consciousness, that we look back as to what's happened, acknowledge that, feeling the pain, yes, we will feel the pain, but understand what we actually, as humans today, will take lessons from that and how we approach ourselves in our lives, in everything that we do. So my question to you about, after hearing Mina's story, your mother's story, is that, you have taken the time to process, to consciously process these stories, because when you tell me these are my role models, there's a reason for that. So it's not just the anger suppressed, it's also the beauty of what they've accomplished, what they've survived, the resiliency that they've passed on to you. I think is just incredible. What do you think?
I think the women in my life have definitely contributed. Let me go back to my father, Hakop's mother, Verjin. Her husband also died very young, left her with 5 children. Now, that grandmother didn't have more than a high school education. So how she brought up those 5 children was amazing. And my aunts were role models. But my mother's side, my grandmother Verjin was very insistent that her granddaughters succeed in life. Her line was, you will make the Shervanyan last name proud. Okay, thank you, Grandma. But what she went through to bring up 5 children
on her own.
On her own was amazing. And they all have educations. So that's what was impressive. On my mother's side, it was just my mother and my grandmother, and she did become a physician. She was taken to the front during the war with the Russian soldiers, and her stories there were traumatic. She used those stories to teach me the value of independent women. When she wanted to go and study in Russia to become a physician, her father said to her, "I have paid for my 2 sons to study, you will marry." She said, "You know what you can do with that?" She ran away, actually earned her degree on her own by working as a tutor and living in a home and helping clean the home. That's the kind of survival skills I think that she put in me because she lived with us. She would constantly say the most important thing is education. I'd get up in the morning and my books were there and my food was there and my bed had been made, and somewhat a spoiled child because of her belief that the higher the woman's education, the better it is for the family. Funny, decades after, the research has proven that a mother's education is the decisive factor for children's education level and success. So this woman knew it intuitively decades ago.
Before the research was published from
yes,
cognitive
long
psychology.
before research was published. Yeah. But what my mother did is then take up the same role. I had a working mother. Her line was, "You can't clap with one hand. You need 2 hands to clap." And she wasn't going to let my father try to bring a family and keep them alive and successful in the United States. And that's, by the way, the reason they moved to the United States was myself. In Iran, a woman's career path was not going to be very easy in the decades when we moved. So having said that, my mother worked all hours, and then she volunteered as president of what was then the Iranian Armenian Society. She volunteered at Ferayan High School as chair of their PTA and the board and all that, and it continued. And as a child, I knew Mamas kaser jogov piti ertam. And that was important.
And you knew what that meant. There's unconditionally, that was a decision.
That's it. I'm sorry that you have to go. You've worked all day and now you're going to leave me to go to a zhorov. Our kids used to say, "Are you sure you don't have a zhorov factory?" And that's fine, because now they're doing this. And that's what role model is taking a look at all of this. But what you've talked about, the pain and the trauma, what I've noticed is I've also kept that away from my own children and grandchildren. I just, for some reason, now understand the survivors, whether it be war or some sort of a natural disaster, why they don't go back and talk about it. But I have to say, Lara, you awakened that in me. Because it was like, why have I never told these stories? At least I know this small tidbit. At least I have these small memories, but don't retell it. And I think after you, I have not retold it. I'm told that you don't want to shock children in America. You want to keep things positive. But what I'm learning is positive has its role.
Of course it does.
But understanding of causes and pain and trauma has a whole other role in helping prevent it from reoccurring.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, I could sit with you for hours, and I say this with all my guests, but with you specifically, because no matter how often I've been sitting and talking with you off camera, on our own, socially, I always tend to learn something from you, which is just very beautiful. But I do have one final question. You, I see you as not just a strong woman, but you've had this one thread, a common thread of being a strong activist all your life. And that's come even from your teaching days, that sense of standing by the rights of minority groups, the Hispanics, the African Americans, the Koreans even, even when you were a superintendent or even as a teacher, you always spoke and stood by the rights of the underdog. And I think that comes, as you mentioned, from the values that you have, which is equity, justice, integrity, inclusivity. Do you feel, now that we were talking a little bit about your history and what your grandparents had gone through, do you see a connection between these values that you have held most of your life up until today and your family's collective trauma? Do you see that kind of connection, and how?
Definitely. definitely. I think when you have been through injustice, you tend to try to stop anyone else from having to go through that same process or same journey themselves.
Regardless of who they are.
Regardless of who they are. I wanted my African American and Hispanic or Asian kids to succeed, and now I'm a strong advocate for diversity and promotions within California school systems. And I handpick women and men representing the different cultures to succeed. I strongly believe once you've suffered some level of trauma or injustice, you become an advocate. So much so that I'm an outspoken, if not overdone, advocate for causes. When someone speaks unjustly or doesn't, we just talked about fact-checking, doesn't check their facts before they speak, others will remain silent. And the saying that if you remain silent when things are said or done, more will happen. And so I, for some reason, find myself the strong, loud advocate, even in my 70s, that you're saying, Alice, can you calm down, really? I have to say, I could not have done a great deal of this without my family's and my children's willingness to allow me to lead and be the person I am.
And Uncle Vahik as well.
That's where I was headed. My wish at the end of this is that everyone in Armenia find a mate the way I found a mate, who was not ashamed to have his wife shine. We were once at an event where I was representing Governor Wilson for all the Catholic Armenians, and I had the governor's seat, and my husband was with me at the head, and an Armenian, very close friend of ours, stepped up and said to my husband in front of me, "How do you like being second fiddle?" And I thought, oh, please don't punch him. And Vahik came back, my wonderful husband came back with a comment that said, because of her, I've had the privilege of meeting the leaders of the Catholic Armenian community. Because of her, I've had the privilege of meeting people that I would have never met. And I've taken this as a learning and growing experience. It takes a great, great man with a great, great love and security. Though he does his own things and he's absolutely successful in those areas, not to be threatened. And what I want to pass on to the young people that might be listening to this is find that mate. And what I want to say to our boys, encourage your wives, encourage your sisters, your mothers to succeed. Because when one succeeds in the family, as the water rises, all boats rise. I assure you, you will also find success.
Amen to that. Alice Shirvanyan Petrossian, it's always a pleasure to sit with you. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Pleasure's mine, darling.